I know the breaks are pretty short. We'll try and catch up some time. We've got a couple of presentations coming up with this panel as well. I'm going to keep it to around 20 minutes, maybe a bit more, but we've had quite a few questions come in already. So I'm going to start off with a question. For starters for the panel, if you were developing, designing online courses, would you go in-house, part-time, or completely external? What's coming on?
I can start. The reason I can start is because I've been fortunate to work both in universities and then recently on fully online degrees. So I guess and I work for a company called Pearson. My company would tell me to say go all external because obviously we can partner with universities and help with developing and designing the courses. But my personal recommendation or my personal thoughts are, and this is what I discussed with colleagues before in the break, that having in-house teams who are experts, like we have learning technologists, having experts in instructional design and learning design, which was separate, and maybe we'll touch upon this in a different question, is beneficial to the university because you can take that experience and feed it back into your rest of the university.
Just add to that, I also work for a company similar to Pearson, to CG Digital, and we collaborate. I mean, we take care of the development and the design of the courses, pretty much as you do. But we also create collaboration with the different e-learning teams within the university, so we learn from each other, we support each other. So it could be a combination from that point of view.
Got a slightly contrasting view, and I definitely appreciate the expertise. It's now instructional designers, but I'm also really into building capacity within institutions. I think that everybody benefits when people are close colleagues and there's not a sense of kind of one or being more adjunct than the other. So I'd be kind of, advocating for in-house roles.
I totally agree with everything everyone said. I think that there's a dilemma, right? Because you do want things to be in-house, and so it can build the culture. However, I think one of the biggest problems is that distance learning, the kind of what even without getting deep into pedagogy, just what you have to generally do to kind of survive, like producing distance learning, presents a kind of a culture which is so different to the culture of universities that it's very hard for the two to coexist. And so, in a way, it presents a great opportunity. People like Kings have done it really well. I think everybody's rooting for them, but it's a tough road.
Speaking of Kings, a question from Leonie. Do you use QM standards? What are they? What do they look like? Do you want to say more about that? In terms of questions.
I think it was about, whether do you use QM standards or any other external quality
matters?
Yeah. What's your view?
Because I just spoke. We haven't done this, so I'll just do it quickly. My name's Matt Jenner from FutureLearn, and I look after the learner experience. So we don't use Quality Matters as a part of our quality framework, but every course on our platform, whether a partner makes it or we make it, goes through a quality assurance process. And we broadly look at three different areas: the pedagogy, the technical, as in does it work on multiple devices, and also the business case, because that's just the industry we're in now. And if it doesn't pass the kind of traffic light system, if it gets any reds, it has to go back to authoring. But if it gets ambers or green, it's always a decision that has to be made. But it's similar to Quality Matters. It's broadly saying, from the sensible list of things, how is it doing? It seems to work.
It's the same for us. We have pretty much the same model. We involve the students as well, so we run some evaluations when we're piloting a new program. we get feedback from the students. So we engage very much also with the university and the processes within the university. The other thing we look after is also the QA standards. So we look at, for example, at the moment learning gains and how that relates to the TEF and how that will basically have a knock-on effect on your teaching experience at university level. Because we are designing online courses at the end of the day to be delivered only half of the university. So from that QA point of view, we keep an eye obviously on those standards.
Another question that came in through the hashtag, how do you get buy-in from all stakeholders to your ID strategy?
Can you speak louder, please, because I can't hear that well.
How can you get buy-in from all your stakeholders for ID strategies, so instructional design strategy?
Actually, I just raised my hand. My answer is I don't know. I don't know why I raised it.
Okay.
But I mean, it's just really difficult. It's it's actually really hard. And at my current role, my director Sam will just like kind of come in first and like big me up. And this guy worked with Google and increased learning this much, and he's amazing. He's going to transform your learning. And I also, been lucky to work with probably certain departments that are just a bit more convenient. And so normally it goes okay. But I've been in situations where when I was in inter-university partnerships, I met with one academic and, I was just kind of, just as a matter of fact, just describing like this is our model, this is how we do it. We need a discussion, just kind of a discussion. And then she just kind of was like silent. She said, "Well, that's not how I teach. You see, what I do is we do, we get in groups and we talk about our problems and do it." And I was like, "Well, okay, so that this can fit into the model this way." And then in the end, she kind of went radio silent for a month, and then she just gave me her PowerPoints, and then told me to work my magic. And so, which I think is very telling of a certain kind of pedagogy, and I know that probably doesn't seem fair to certain people, but, and then actually, sorry, and I'll wrap up the story, the head of the dev team, Sasha, said, she stood up for me and said, if you guys told the director, if you think this is acceptable, I quit, which was epic. So
What happened next?
Yeah. And then I lost my job.
So you hinted on pedagogy. We've got another question here. Are there distinct digital pedagogies, and if so, how would you define them?
I don't think there are distinct pedagogies. I mean, it's like you need to go from here to Manchester. Okay, so that's your journey. So you have to move from here to Manchester, and you can go through different methods. So you can go by bus, you can fly to Manchester, you can go on the train. Sometimes it's faster. So that's the journey, the experience. So it's the same when you learn. But if you know what you're going to be teaching, what you're going to be able to do at the end when you get to Manchester, that's what will define the way you will design the experience. It's the same journey. It's just that if you do it fully online, if you do it blended, if you do it just face-to-face, but if you think about what your learners will be able to do at the end of that journey, and if you add creativity to that, as you were saying before, your journey will be as effective or less effective.
So I have a question then, because what we don't seem to have in institutions at the moment are instructional designers for in-person education. We've got instructional designers for digital education. So what do we make of that?
But it's because that's the way it's been perceived. But learning is learning. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's fully online or if it's face-to-face or blended. And I think that's the key point when you think about your learning outcomes. I think that's why I like learning outcomes, because that helps you to concentrate on what you want your learners to be able to do at the end. And then I use Bloom taxonomy to identify, what level of engagement you are targeting. If you are thinking about low level cognitive skills or high level cognitive skills, then different pedagogies would work better.
Can I go to the
Questions to the room? Yeah.
Yes, so I was thinking about if you design a fully online learning unit, Or if you design face-to-face, kind of saying you're going to design the same thing, but you design it differently, being the learning objectives the same. So you teach one module and you decide to do these two versions because you have options. To do the same design for both versions.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Well, because you were talking about the journey to Manchester, so I was
Yeah.
thinking, yes, but is that always?
Yeah, so let's say you want your learners to be able to explain some concepts at the end of the session. And so you think about your verb to explain something. That means high-level cognitive engagement. So they don't need to go out and remember something. They need to be able to actually have, digested that and be able to explain that in their own words. So if we're looking at the online environment, for you to be able to explain something, you need to be able to verbalize what you're thinking. You need to be able to think and reflect. So what can you do online? If you're doing something fully online, a discussion group, ask the students to produce something tangible that will express their feeling, ask the students to discuss among each other what they're thinking. So, and you engage in the conversation, like Professor Larila, in the conversational framework in that experience. If you're doing something face-to-face, don't do this. Have practical teamwork where people can talk and express themselves and get feedback.
Sorry, just to add, first, I totally agree. I think this, when people say digital pedagogy, I get really uncomfortable because it's usually nonsense, but kind of proceeds after that. What I do think differs is obviously there's certain things you can't do online that you can do face-to-face, certain affordances. And I think that, it's like people say about sports, like sports doesn't build character, reveals character. I think there's something about that online that, if you have a badly designed online course, its abjectness tends to be a little more exposed than those face-to-face.
Can we take a couple more questions from previously? So this one's from Matt, actually. How can the profession of learning designers be more recognised? Does it need an awarding body, professional development framework, portfolio-based accreditation, or is it good enough?
Oh, I have an answer. I'm answering my own question. No way.
Somebody else, or even
Basically, professionalisation of learning design, instructional design. So what level is it at? Do we need more or less?
Somebody from the audience who is a learning designer?
Yeah,
at
let's
London
flip this
University.
one.
Let's flip this to you to answer the question.
I'm going to say what I said online, which is, are we kind of that hybrid space between partnership with HEA and CMOL?
Maybe.
Does that kind of have us covered? I can't think anything that's not funded either that would be specifically for us.
Sorry, Albert.
As a learning designer, I think a lot of it is about our recognition within institutions. If you're an academic, there is a ladder you can go on. There is not that same ladder for learning design people don't understand it well enough, and that gives us the structure where there are loads of people who can just shove stuff in the VLE. And then when you go to higher levels, it's a lot more difficult to progress. And I think that drives a lot.
We came back to what Leonard said about culture in the UK and our perceptions of it, maybe with that. Sorry, there was hands up there.
Yes, there's also the international board of standards for training and performance instruction. I don't know if you guys know that.
Sorry, could you say?
The National Board of Standards for Training and Performance Instruction. We have these statements basically links to what an instructional designer should do. And I mean, when you look at it, it's a very, very high standard. But I think that one of the ways that we enable students would be when we're able to basically prove the rationality behind each of the design choices that we made and to match that against the outcome of what the student can do. But very often, going back to what Amir was saying, we can't get engagement from the students beginning. So it's kind of like a vicious circle. I think that once we're able to do that, it might be one way to go through the recognized profession.
Yeah, I think professional standards recognition there are all sorts of really good reasons to have it, and which is and I think this is something people just understand. Build some
closer.
Can be building a wall. I'm not saying it would be.
Yeah, I was just going to say two things actually. One is that most sort of academic development units have supposed to be doing that job for quite many years, sort of often don't. But the second thing is that if you actually try and professionalise it and create this layer of instructional designers, I think you get a tremendous amount of kickback from academics. Because mostly I find that when we're trying to improve their either face-to-face or online offerings, you've got to be very wary about treading on toes and approach it in a very delicate way, probably in a way that you don't have to think about in a more commercial environment where you can tell them what their role is and what's expected of them. Whereas I think academics assume that they have autonomy and knowledge in that area and get very defensive if you tell them otherwise.
Well, just come in on that. Would you apply the same argument to educational developers in like in the face-to-face setting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think there's I don't think there's any difference between them and
That was very easy.
oh, sorry.
I think this is the issue of what are we certifying within the room. We have many different ideas of what a learning designer does, and if you ask academics, they will have a different idea. Depending on who you ask, they will give you a different answer. And I think this is really fascinating between someone who comes maybe from publishing, someone who comes from teaching, someone who comes from a different background. Everybody will have a different idea of what we're supposed to do and who will bring value to what we do. So I think there's also this question of how do we explain what we do, how we can help and encourage people to want to work with us rather than having them say, oh no, I don't need anyone.
So just quick show of hands, who is an instructional designer or identifies as that in this room? Or a learning designer, this is the UK.
Or senior learning
designer. Senior learning designer. Anybody else senior? Yeah, who works in the private sector in this room? Okay.
I think for most of my experience,
yeah. What's okay? So you were previously saying with these guys.
Disclaimer.
What would you say is the difference? Sorry, I'm asking a question. So, what would you say is the difference between working in an HE institution and
it's a lot more efficient in the private sector.
Right.
Being the first thing. I mean, I came from a learning technologist role and now a manager / academy lead for I think one of the challenges when you're working in this kind of environment is when in the instructional design capacity, you're trying to persuade many ways people who are experts in their field that they've got to do something, or that there is an area where they can improve. And in my experience, I don't like to hear that very much. So that's a real challenge. So I'm now in a completely different setting where actually I'm trying to say to people the tool that I am using or developing or working with you is something that can help you improve your knowledge yourself. I don't know if that makes sense. It kind of does to me, but
okay. That's interesting. There's a question again here from. Sorry, yeah, go on. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I know
still
you're trying to make sure everyone's questions are heard. Just quick, just in response to those last few points, I just think that academic, I think maybe sometimes what's going on in the private sector, like the kinds of knowledge that, or the kinds of courses or outcomes that are being taught are sometimes different from in higher education. Higher education's got cultures of negotiating what's going to be taught, they've got the government structures, it's going to take longer. I think there are strengths there. I'm not sure that, I think we should ask, if it's true that academics really don't like hearing, from educational developers / instructional designers, why is that? We assume that it's so. I think probably in the room we're going to have a patchy experience, and some people are going to find that, academics respond well to what they're trying to do, and other people are going to maybe find out that they don't. And it might be, there's something cultural going on here, I think, rather than something to do with the roles themselves.
A really important point to make is that I think that that's why we have these discussions about certification and standards, is that because of this sort of culture where academics don't want to believe that anyone can be good at anything, know about anything, who basically doesn't have a PhD. No, I mean, but if you read someone like Stephen Collini, this is, he talks about outside discourses. Instructional design, I think, would qualify as an outside discourse. We, to sort of fit in, we sort of kind of castrate. Sorry, that's the only word I can think of. In order to, sorry, Mira, I know, but self-camouflage or self-deprecate in order to have these conversations. Then we go into constant facilitation mode, and we relativize our own knowledge, where we go, things that we know loads about what good online learning is, but then we act like we don't in order to fit in, and then
great.
When we're talking about certification, standards and so on, we really need to ask ourselves, what do we actually need for what is the end goal? And maybe a more useful or pragmatic way would be to want something along the lines of the research development framework from BITAE, B-I-T-A-E, where you have effectively a framework of skills and so on various levels, and then you can assess yourself against it. Because that would be something that you can then use in your appraisals, and that management can use for job descriptions, and that we can use that to communicate better what the actual individual person at the particular institution is doing.
Thanks. So I was going to make a kind of point about culture that maybe you mentioned. I think some people don't see teaching as a profession at any level. I think it's particularly ironic as well that many lecturers and universities do not have teaching qualifications. Our own university, City University, 30% do. I believe the Russell Group, some haven't even disclosed the NISA, haven't because they're collecting the data. To those that have, some have disclosed 10% of their teaching qualifications. So I find it really ironic that why would they not listen to people who do really have experience of learning and teaching and take on board? In my experience, actually, some of them will do, and you can flip that back onto us and say, well, what's one way forward? Because we need to demonstrate the value of what we're doing by creating meaningful kind of pedagogic design patterns that actually improve the student experience.
I kind of want to come back to that question about the differences between universities and context. I work in context now, having spent most of my career in the university. And I think the difference is that instructional designers and learning technologists are working with subject matter experts to create a product that's actually for sale, and we live or die by that product. So we're actually seen completely as an ally, because we have to take this great, subject matter, which often comes out in all kinds of, sort of streams of consciousness, and it's our jobs to actually turn this into something we can actually sell. Whereas in a university, well, you've got a captive audience. So, often I'm seeing some shakes of head, but often I'm seeing academics say, well, they're in the class, I teach them best, I know what's best, and so what value do you bring? I mean, for us, all of our stuff is online. The instructional designer brings a really clear value to the content, and so we're very much seen as allies.
I think going back to previous point and your point, I think when you see the role of the research-intensive university, when people really involved in research have to teach, that's when the educational development units were supporting those researchers to be able to teach and to engage with the audience and everything else. And I think because it hasn't fully online programs haven't been evolving as quickly as we are in the private sector. It's not really something that is growing quickly inside the universities. Obviously, that hasn't really triggered a new way of, training the trainers, training the academics for the learning technologies. But I think that will happen. I mean, it's just that it's early days for universities to. It hasn't been disrupted enough, within the university. Probably because we are coming from outside, also helping universities. But I think it will.
Okay. I'm just conscious of time. Can you please thank our panel and.
Right. Yeah, I actually was a teacher for 8.5 years of secondary, so I really don't like the word instruction at all. To me, it feels like I hear instruction manual. So I will say I am a learning designer for half a week. And the other half of the week, I actually do learning analytics, where I have been looking at what learning analytics might be for UCL and what we've got and how that might be useful to us. And this is kind of a hybrid of those two things, really. So I'm going to talk a bit about learning, how we might identify what learning is happening, or certainly what learning activities are happening, and how we can use that to feed into our own practice. So kind of the encouragement of reflective practice. Certain institutions say, so this is obviously the Bologna image. Our lectures are massively different. The purpose of the lecture is different. We're no longer transcribing from the Bible to share discrete knowledge with a select few. But often someone asleep and someone throwing stuff is actually massively different. So this is the classic definition from Stevens and Gasovich. This is the one that's recognised by the Society of Learning Analytics Researchers. There's a big bit here that talks about understanding and optimising learning and the environments in which it occurs. So a lot of the data that we get is very context specific. Our BLE courses are very, very different. So someone might use Moodle literally as the repository for their module documentation and their online assessments. Others might be a fully blended online course. Okay, like it really is truly part of that, and it varies greatly. So the data we get out of that and what things mean, that varies greatly. So context is massive. Okay. So talking about learning analytics, people tend to think it predominantly in two ways. Mostly in the USA and the States, and certainly here. We can think about retention, so bums on seats, to put it crudely. That's a massive use. And there's kind of more of an increase of actually getting improved student outcomes. So can we nudge those thirds to 2-2s? Can we get those 2-2s to a 2-1? If we're going down the consumer route, then they want the best bang for their buck, basically. And can we use learning analytics to do that? For me, it's about giving the students a good learning experience, because that's what we're doing. We're creating an experience for them where hopefully they will get a passion for their subject. And it's not just about what's the reaction I say. Did we forget something? Did we forget the learning bit? Really? And that's what I want us to think about. It's like, yes, I taught Scott to whistle. I can't hear him whistling. I said I taught him to whistle. Didn't say that I checked that he could. And this can be kind of the problem in some respects. It's like, hey, look, we're delivering this stuff. But are they actually kind of getting it? And are we getting it in the way that we want them to? And hopefully data might be able to give us some of that. So, and this is where I show my age. How will we actually know? Yeah. I now have this song playing in my head, so I apologise. So, very, very quickly, how do you know? How do you know what you should do? How do we know they're doing the things we want them to do? Assessment strategies. Yeah, what else we got? Yeah. Yeah, so that's always the start of a MOOC thing. You know, what are you aiming to achieve? Well, actually, to be honest, after about a couple of hours, I'm fed up of thinking about it. I'm not going to name any names, but there's some people's things I don't like very much. So is this an art or a science? So there's things that we need to think about. So digital learning gives us a data footprint. We know that every digital system someone touches gives us a footprint. It logs those data. But can that give us things that allow us to do in-flight and post interventions? Can we identify a critical path through the data? So when I look at Moodle activity, I can see the path that people have taken through those activities. I can see when they did it, roughly how long they stayed on it, if I really want to be thinking about it. I can get an idea, and I can get an idea of really how to go through it. We can think about how granular we might want this data to be, whether we want to look at a whole group level, a small level, if we want to look at some big small stuff, and how can we get from engagement, which is kind of what we talk about a lot. These are all proxies for engagement in this wonderful world of learning analytics, although no one actually can define engagement properly, to attainment. And I'd rather than be engaged and enjoy it, and if they attain well, that's so about this lecture, or about this learning thing that's going on, what can we tell about it? What have we got that might help us? So this is Echo. This isn't our real Echo data, this is something that I got from Echo. So we use Echo 360, it's in a lot of our big lecture spaces, and it kind of runs with most of the courses. So you've got quite a bit here. So we've got kind of the when people are accessing it, and there's loads of nice stuff down here. So we can kind of see, so what's nice here is that you've got confusion flags. So if we know we're delivering something in a lecture, it's one of those really key things that they kind of need to get, but we know it can be hard to get. So personally, the first time I learned normalization, I was a computer scientist, I learned database hints. It took me about a term to get my head around normal form. I now can't unget my head around normal form, and I normalise every bit of data I look at. I'm a bit sad. But if that's super important, and there's bits in there that you know they desperately need to get, and you're not entirely sure, they can flag it like in a lecture if you do every single time. And you can review at the end of the lecture to see whether they've got it or not. So this isn't necessarily for us, this is for our academics. So there's nice confusion flag things in there. And it gives us an idea if they're kind of getting it or not. We've also got a whole load of stuff around, so you can also embed things like class quizzes and activities. Because you can upload this beforehand and you can make this part of the lecture. So you can kind of see how much of the activities they participated in, and then if it's a quiz, how much they actually got right. So you can check if they're actually engaging in the stuff you want to do in the lecture. You can check if they're understanding the stuff. And this notes bit can be quite crucial. Some of the research has found that some students with spells can actually overdo the notes a bit on the lecture capture. So it's quite a nice way to check that some students are doing a bit too much. But also you can kind of have a nosy at what their notes are about and see if there's any kind of key things. So it gives you a chance to reflect on what it is that you're delivering and what might be a sticky point. So we used to have a pretty heat map, and you can see the bits of the video that they've watched again and again. And it's a similar sort of idea to that. So it just gives you a feel of kind of what they're thinking is important and the bits they're getting and then they're not getting. This always comes out really badly. Okay, I've got white on something that's not slightly white, and it doesn't transfer over from that. Basically, it's two beakers together, so this idea of that, well, what about blended learning? So this is a Moodle log file. This is the activity report for Moodle. And yeah, it's a bit much. I understand what this means. I doubt very much many of our academics pull this out and take it. And this is real. This is from an information security course that I used to help look after when I built. And the student with blah 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 did blah. What does that mean? Blah blah. So if you want to kind of see if they're doing stuff, this is a little bit easier. So this is the group line here. Just get them going. Yeah. So there was 34 looks at this thing called passwords, and 6 people did it. Okay, so you start to get a feel when you look at this going, you know, this is really basic stuff, but actually, these are the things that I put in this course, these are the things that I think are important. Are they looking at the things that I think are important, or are they completely ignoring them? For some of you, this won't be anything particularly exciting. We can also kind of look specifically at the user activity report, so if you've got completion set, you can say, well, actually think they did these things, so they are hitting the things that I want. But sometimes we want to know about the time and the sequence that they've done stuff. So we know they've done stuff for kind of when. Probably can't see this. Okay, so this is kind of Tableau. This is real actions. It's not the explicit thing, but you kind of get an idea of, so this is actually a specific student actually for a course, their courses. And kind of in November they did an awful lot of reading messages. So the darker the colour, the more they did. So you kind of get an idea of what are the things they did more of when. So you get this idea of this path through. This can be refined a bit more, but I was just kind of playing with the base actions data really. So you can kind of get this sense of what are they doing, what sequence are they doing it in, what's kind of confusing. So we kind of went, okay, I've got this. Well, can I actually mix this with the ABC stuff? Okay, so it's actually here, and I'm not going to say too much, I'm just going to kind of leave this. So ABC is kind of the learning design thing that we did here. It's storyboard based. We're going, well, actually, can we feed this idea of these data things? So there's going to be questions that come up when we do the ABC. There's going to be things that we're going to change, but we might want a bit more discussion. So we might put a forum in. We might want to see if they do more certain things. So can we check? Well, the data's there. So we can actually start to ask those questions about the learning and check it. And so we tend to think about what they want to know. So at this point we say, well, actually, let's think about data. So let's think about little bits of data. Because there's huge data removal. It's terrifying at times. But actually, what is it? What is it that you want to know about that change in design? What is it that you want to know that they've got? Trying to make sure that it fits in with things if there's a critical path. But we're asking specific questions. Just 3 questions. Things that you might want to know about that course. You know, if you designed a pathway, are they following the pathway? If you wanted more discussions, are they doing more discussions? There's a really difficult thing I want them to get in lesson 3. Did they get it? Well, let's go and eventually get it. It's not massive things, it's just little things that might help people reflect on their practice and improve the learning experience for a student. So we first had a go at this at LDSIN. We designed a sample module, and we got people to kind of have a bit of play. We then refined that a little bit for DigiFest. So we did some work with JISC and Patrick Lynch from Hull and Julian Berry from this. And we actually worked with JISC to develop some data-informed blended learning design workshops. So initially we had this example learning design, and we got people to design their questions and pick out data types. Then we got them to actually design their own designs, which is always easier when it's your own stuff. And at some point we just got them to think about what it might be, and that's the point. It's just thinking about how this might be useful to you and how it might feed back in to the next iteration of the design process, really. But it's also about, in that design process, giving yourself enough time to change something as well. So if you know you've got this really difficult topic and you know they might not get it, give yourself space to readdress it next week, or give yourself space so that you can put extra things in the VLE to support or whatever. So it's kind of having that in your head and being able to do that tweak as you go along. So why bother? Well, actually, we want you to reflect, we want you to think about what you're doing. This is what it's there for. Certainly, compulsory education is all about reflective practice. It's about eyeballing 30 students in the room and going, right, actually, I need to do something a bit different. I need to change that next week. I know they've not got that. You can't do that with 300 elective data, so you need the technology to help you to a certain extent. So, planting the friend. And it will help us adjust things. It's about that tweak. It's about either feeding back into that new design process next time, about giving yourself that wiggle room to do something about it. You put forums in, great, no one's using it. Well, actually, I need to do something different about it. Then maybe I need to put a question prompt in and see what happens. It's about opening yourself up and giving yourself that chance to do something a little bit different. Hopefully, students might do better. If they've got a better experience, you're addressing things that they're not sure about, you know, it might give us better outcomes. I'm just hoping it gives us a better experience. I had to drop this in, so with all the debate about learning objectives, and that we could be seen to be engineering things to a specific path. Because students will go off piece, and that's great. Some of them will go off and read things, and I always read things at a random tangent or whatever. Yeah, we don't want to nail it down too much, and we don't want to be too dictator-like. I'm not going to try to say the other word of that. And that kind of has to be born in the head all the time. Have you seen this before? I like Mr. Racing Club. And what he says is very true. At that point, I'm going to stop waffling and see if you've got any questions. Because I think that's about half an hour.
The question is regards using the ABC. Can you guys use that as an actual, app or tool
I'm going to look at Natasha.
Considering that everybody doesn't use it the same way, everybody has the same strategy approach. Is it?
All right, may I?
Yeah.
Okay, I used to take you on the last next years, sort of working with another 11 universities across Europe, all the different theories and different programs and different structures, and it's called ABC clearly. One of these would be looking, one of the aspects that we look at is how to use small data. So it would be one of them that we look at what these different universities. So in 2 years' time, we may have something, but it won't be like something you and force it up. So it's something that is still under that. But it might be helpful to people to see.
Yeah, so we do ABC on paper. We do it in a room with a bunch of academics, and it can be purely face-to-face and it can be blended stuff or purely online. It's as and when people want it, and it can be for any form of learning.
We had 3 different color stickers or 4 if they wanted to mark engagement or progression or understanding or threshold concept. They would put them on in the same way as we do with the other things. And then they say, okay, this is for this activities here. I want to do intervention.
Okay, quick question.
So basically, the concept is in the opinion that independently you need to mentally attack versus keep working right to versus the music analysis work. You talking on these windows using more using special stuff. We use that kind of measure family.
We didn't get that far. That might be maybe interesting to talk about after the exercise course.
Yeah, a couple of questions and then we'll break those a little. Yeah, do there.
The question is around Natasha actually, and I'm wondering how the instructional designer relates to ABC on the one hand and this data with ABC on the other. What's the relationship between the instructional designer role and this?
I think you kind of guide the ABC a little bit. So it's through the facilitation, and you kind of sometimes people have a nasty habit of just doing the same thing on the cards. So I throw something, a completely wild card out there of how to do something that's a bit different, and then they kind of meet me somewhere in the middle. So it's kind of a nudge. It's kind of that, well, have you considered blah, I've seen this work that way. So it can be just kind of shifting, kind of a gentle nudge in the conversation of it, yeah.
So usually instructional designers is one of the code and
yeah, you can only do as much as the knowledge around the table is, as much as there is a knowledge around the table. So even an instructional designer might actually be more and open some bounds.
I think I would like to add an answer for your question, Mira. From my perspective, the way instructional designer can support the ABC design sessions and inform them with the learning activities
of with the academics while they are designing. And you come to the question of assessment, and designing the assessment. So the instructional designer, the way I do it is asking the academic, what do you want to measure really? And that is when we connect to the learning analytics, so the kind of metrics, the kind of behavioral metrics that you want to observe and keep in the database reference. Then you will see what you really want to do. That's your left. But I would do it in that way, within an ABC session. My question was for you about when you said make yourself a little bit of time to redesign
I think it's,
your course.
you might give yourself a bit of wiggle room in flight.
Yeah.
You know, not nail down the seminar exactly if you've got a follow-up seminar. Allow yourself that I can throw something else in, or I can throw something else in on mine. Don't nail down the homework. Just
that's the thing. When you had presented your analytics, the examples that you had shown, and we were seeing like the analytics from cohort, bunch of a number of individuals. So I'm looking at these numbers and I see, okay, I look at my student, one of these students, that, and then the visualization of the path.
Yeah.
The sequence that you showed that, I assume that meant the path for one individual and not the cohort. So analyzing these facts and making a sensible decision about what is the change, what is it that you have to change in your design based on that data. That requires a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, I'd wait for that for the redesign process, actually. So you're probably going to review it next year. And that's when you might look at all of that.
Okay, so the question is actually how much time, how long are we talking about in that time? How long is for the redesigning for the next rerun?
Yeah, I'd have a look at it for the next rerun. I mean, there are things that if you can see clearly they're not using the forums, and you've got and you think that's really important, then you need to think about what you're doing with the forums anyway. And that you can do in flight if it's you choking the questioning. Right. Someone lurking.
That would be like the quickest.
That's the
quickest.
I've got some more questions. Please put them on the hashtag. We'll try and answer them at some point. Round of applause to Samantha.